The Kreth Empire had never lost a war. Not once. Not in 4,000 years of expansion across 900 star systems. They had crushed the Velhari in 6 weeks. The dominion of Sol had lasted 3 days before their homeworld burned. The Orin Collective, who had 60 planets and a fleet that blocked out suns, had begged for mercy in a single afternoon. The Kreth did not give mercy. They gave terms, submission or ash. Those were the 2 choices, always had been. So when scouts first detected the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star on the outer rim of the Milky Way, nobody in the Kreth High Command got excited. It was a routine survey, a small world, a blue-green rock wrapped in weather. The beings on it were made of carbon and water. They were young, embarrassingly young, as a civilization. They had not yet left their home system in any serious way. One scout ship observed them for a standard cycle. The report it sent back was 3 lines long. Species human, technology level pre-interstellar, threat level 0, recommended action, standard absorption protocol. Standard absorption protocol meant a show of force. You sent a fleet, not your whole fleet, that would be wasteful. You sent enough ships to make the sky dark. You opened a communication channel. You told them their world now belonged to the Empire. You gave them 48 hours to begin the surrender process. Usually they cried. Sometimes they prayed. Once, only once with the Velhari, they fired back. That had been a mistake on the Velhari's part, a very final mistake. The Kreth High Command assigned the Earth mission to Fleet Commander Duth Verk. He was not a young commander. He had 43 campaigns behind him. He was methodical, professional, and completely without imagination, which the High Command considered a virtue. Imagination led to hesitation. Hesitation led to casualties. Duth Verk had never hesitated in his life. He was given 3,000 warships. 3,000 was more than enough. It was actually excessive. The standard absorption fleet for a pre-interstellar species was 500 ships, but the High Command had recently been in a generous mood, and Duth Verk had asked for 3,000 on the grounds that Earth had 7 billion inhabitants and a complete disregard for their own safety, which the scouts had noted. Better to arrive overwhelming. Better to leave no room for ideas. Duth Verk looked at the blue planet on his display screen and felt nothing in particular. Another rock, another species, another day. He opened the communication channel. On Earth, it was a Tuesday. More specifically, it was a Tuesday morning in Geneva, Switzerland, where the United Nations Emergency Assembly had been in session for 6 hours straight. The alien fleet had appeared at the edge of the solar system 9 hours ago. The world's governments had spent 3 of those hours arguing about who should speak first on the communication channel, 2 hours arguing about what language to use, and 1 hour arguing about whether they should speak at all. The remaining 3 hours had been used for something else entirely. Working. Because while the diplomats argued about optics and protocols and who got to stand in front of the camera, a different set of people had been busy. Generals, engineers, physicists, weapons designers, intelligence analysts, people who had spent their entire careers thinking about exactly this scenario. The aliens did not know this. The aliens did not know a lot of things about humans. They did not know, for example, that the human species had spent most of its civilized history trying to kill itself. They did not know that humans had fought wars on every continent, in every ocean, across every terrain that existed on their planet. They did not know that human beings had a particular and very specific gift, the ability to look at something trying to kill them and immediately start thinking about how to kill it back. The Kreth scouts had noted their technology level, pre-interstellar, correct. They had not noted other things. They had not noted that humans had nuclear weapons in quantities that could end their own world 3 times over. They had not noted the 40 years of secret defense research into directed energy weapons, railguns, kinetic kill vehicles, and electromagnetic pulse systems. They had not noted the underground bunker networks on every continent, built during the Cold War, maintained quietly ever since by governments who never publicly admitted what they were actually afraid of. They had not noted that humans, uniquely among the carbon-based species the Kreth had catalogued, did not have a single unified government, which meant there was no single point of political failure. You could not simply demand surrender from Earth. There was no one human to surrender. There were 200 nations, each with its own military, its own weapons, its own stubborn and specific sense of pride. Darth Vader sent his message down to the planet. People of Earth, your world has been claimed by the Kreth Empire. You will begin surrender procedures within 48 of your hours. Resistance is not advised. We have come with 3,000 warships. You have nothing that can harm us. He waited. The response came back 11 minutes later. It was a human voice, calm, female, no detectable fear in it. Fleet Commander, this is Secretary General Alina Vazek of the United Nations. We have received your message. We are considering our options. We will respond in 24 hours. Darth Vader found this mildly irritating. Pre-interstellar species usually responded within minutes. Fear was a reliable accelerant, but 24 hours was still within the surrender window. He told himself it was fine. He did not know what Alina Vazek was doing during those 24 hours. Nobody did, except the people in the room with her. In the room with her were 31 people. Not politicians. The politicians had been politely but firmly moved to a secondary chamber 2 hours earlier. The 31 people were scientists, military commanders, and 3 individuals whose job titles did not appear in any public record anywhere. They talked for 6 hours. Then they stopped talking and started planning. The plan was not complicated. Complicated plans failed. Simple plans, executed with absolute commitment, had a better record. Every military mind in that room had learned this the same way, through watching complicated plans fall apart under pressure and watching simple ones hold. The core of the plan was this. The Kreth expected surrender. They expected a species that had never fought an alien enemy, never seen an alien weapon, never had to adapt to an entirely unknown threat. They expected shock and paralysis. They were going to get the opposite. One of the 3 people without a public job title, a woman named Dr. Yeva Strand, who had spent 22 years working in a facility that officially did not exist, laid a set of documents on the table. She had not slept. Her eyes were steady. We have been thinking about this moment for 30 years, she said. Not this exact moment, but a version of it, and we built things. Quietly. Because quiet is the only way you get to build things nobody tries to stop you building. She opened the documents. The room got very still. When the 24 hours were up, Alina Vazek opened the channel again. Darth Vader had been expecting a surrender. He had already prepared the absorption paperwork. It was standard template, a few names changed, a few planetary coordinates updated. He'd done it 43 times. His aide had the forms ready. Vazek's voice came through. Fleet Commander, we have considered your terms. He waited. We decline. Darth Vader stared at the communication screen. Then he blinked once. Repeat that, he said to his communications officer. The recording played again. We decline. He sat back in his command chair. Around him, his officers exchanged the particular look that experienced soldiers exchange when something breaks from pattern. Not panic, just recalibration. The moment before a new set of assumptions gets built. Move the fleet to engagement distance, Darth Vader said. His voice was flat and professional. Standard bombardment formation. Let them see us. 3,000 Kreth warships moved toward Earth. They were the most advanced weapons platforms in this arm of the galaxy. Their hulls were built from compressed alloy that laughed at nuclear fire. Their weapons could crack moons. Their shields had never been penetrated by any weapon any enemy had ever fired. They moved in perfect formation, because they always moved in perfect formation, because nothing they had ever encountered had given them a reason to do anything differently. On Earth, 14 separate ground-based systems came online simultaneously. In orbit, 17 platforms that had been logged in public records as communication satellites stopped pretending. And in 3 underground facilities on 3 different continents, the things that Dr. Yeva Strand had spent 22 years building very quietly woke up for the first time. The first Kreth ship that went dark was a mid-range cruiser on the left flank of the formation. It did not explode. It did not burn. Its lights simply went out. Every system on board shut down at the same instant, as if someone had reached inside it and turned off the power at the source. It drifted. The second ship went dark 11 seconds later. Then 2 more. Then 7. Then the pattern lost its rhythm and ships started going dark in clusters, 5 here, 12 there, a gap, then 30 at once in a rippling cascade that moved through the formation like a wave moving through water. Duth Verk had never seen anything like it. "Report," he said. His voice was still flat. Flat was what he had. Flat was what he had built over 43 campaigns to keep himself from making decisions out of emotion. "We don't know, sir." His tactical officer's hands were moving over her console. No weapon signatures, no energy discharge detected. They just went offline. "Hull breach." "Negative, no breach. No explosion, no radiation. They simply stopped." Duth Verk looked at his display. 47 ships had gone dark in the 3 minutes since he'd moved the fleet to engagement distance. They were not destroyed. They were just off, dead in space, drifting. 47 ships, out of 3,000. A small number, a manageable number, but the pattern was wrong. The pattern was wrong, and 43 campaigns had taught him that when the pattern was wrong, you stopped and you thought before you moved. He stopped the fleet. He thought. He did not think long enough. Because in the 60 seconds he spent thinking, 40 more ships went dark. The communication channel from Earth opened again. Alina Vazik's voice, still calm, still no fear in it. "Fleet Commander, that was a warning. We are capable of disabling your fleet entirely. We are also capable of something considerably worse. We would prefer not to demonstrate the worse option. We suggest you pull back to the edge of the solar system and wait while we talk." Duth Verk looked at his display. 87 dark ships drifting at the edge of his formation like dead leaves. No weapon had fired. No explosion had occurred. 87 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy were simply switched off. He opened his mouth to give an order. And then the 88th ship went dark. It was his flagship's escort cruiser, the one flying directly off his port side, close enough that he could see it on the direct visual screen, its lights winking out in sequence, system by system from bow to stern, like something was walking through it and turning off every room it passed through. The silence on the bridge was total. Duth Verk closed his mouth. He opened the channel back to Earth. "We will pause," he said, "while we talk." He told himself it was tactical. He told himself he was gathering information. He told himself 43 campaigns and he had never been rattled, not once, and he was not rattled now. He told himself all of that. He was not entirely sure he believed it. Down on the blue planet, in a room full of 31 people, someone started to laugh. Not a triumphant laugh. Not a cruel one. Just the laugh of a person who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has just been given permission for one moment to exhale. Alina Vazik did not laugh. She was already thinking about part 2. The Kreth High Command did not panic. Panic was for species that had never built an empire. The Kreth had protocols for unexpected developments, the same way they had protocols for everything else. When Duth Verk's report arrived, 89 ships disabled, no weapon signatures, cause unknown. The High Command convened within the hour. The meeting lasted 6 minutes. The conclusion was simple. 3,000 ships had been insufficient, not because Earth was powerful, because the Kreth had underestimated the psychological value of overwhelming force. Clearly 3,000 ships had not made the proper impression. The humans had found some kind of trick, probably a localized jamming system, probably limited in range and scope, and had used it to buy negotiating time. The answer was more ships. Not 5,000, not 8,000. 15,000. With 15,000 warships in Earth's orbit, no jamming system would matter. No trick would survive. The sky would not just go dark, it would disappear. You could not stare at 15,000 warships and feel anything but absolute, soul-level surrender. The High Command had done this before with the Oran Collective. Even the Oran, who had 60 planets and a fleet of their own, had looked at that number and simply sat down. The order went out. From 7 systems, reinforcement fleets began moving toward Earth. They would arrive in 12 days. Duthverk spent those 12 days in orbit. Talking. He had not expected to be talking. He had expected to give terms, receive a signature, and move on. Instead, he found himself in daily communication sessions with a rotating roster of human representatives, scientists, diplomats, military officers, who asked him questions with the relentless, slightly maddening energy of people who had no sense that they were supposed to be afraid. They asked about Kreth ship construction. He told them nothing. They asked about Kreth propulsion systems. He told them nothing. They asked about the absorption protocol, how it had worked on other species, what happened to those species afterward, whether they maintained their governments and cultures, or whether those things were dissolved. He answered that last set of questions. He answered because the answers were public record within the Empire, and because he was a professional, and because answering did not cost him anything. He watched the humans on his screen take notes. He noted in a back corner of his mind that he did not examine closely, that they did not seem distressed by the answers. They seemed interested, the way engineers look at a machine they are trying to understand. He did not examine that thought closely. He spoke instead to his aide, a young officer named Reth, who had never been on an absorption campaign before, and who had been asking questions Duthverk found moderately irritating. "They're stalling," Reth said on the 8th day. "Clearly, they know the reinforcements are coming. They're gathering information." "Yes," said Duthverk. "Should we stop talking to them?" Duthverk looked at the visual feed of Earth, blue and white and green, turning slowly. The humans had 6 billion more people than the largest species the Kreth had ever absorbed, 1,400 languages, 7 major religious traditions, each of which apparently had several hundred subtraditions that disagreed with each other violently. 206 distinct national militaries, none of which fully trusted any of the others, all of which had been on the communication channel at various points. "No," he said. He did not explain why. He was not sure he could have explained why. On Earth, the 12 days were not spent on diplomacy. Diplomacy was the cover. It was real. Vazik's team was genuinely gathering everything they could, but it was not the main event. The main event was happening underground and underwater, and in facilities that appeared on no public map. Dr. Yevastrand had not slept properly in 11 days. She did not particularly notice. Sleep deprivation was a familiar condition. She had written 3 of her most important papers in states of sleep deprivation, so advanced that she'd later found notes in her own handwriting that she had no memory of writing. Her brain simply ran hotter than most people's, and cooler sleep was the cost of that. She was standing in the primary control room of Facility 7, which was located 400 meters below a mountain in northern Norway, which had been called a geological survey station in public records for 30 years, when the second set of scout data came in. 15,000 ships. She looked at the number. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, doing arithmetic. Then she went back to work. The thing she had spent 22 years building, the thing she had called in her private notes, simply the concept, had worked against the initial fleet better than she'd expected. 93 ships total, disabled without a single conventional weapon fired. The mechanism was elegant and brutal and entirely invisible from the outside. The Kreth had described it, in intercepted internal communications, as a jamming system. It was not a jamming system. It was something that had no name in any Kreth language, because the Kreth had never thought of it, because the Kreth had never needed to think of it, because the Kreth had always won by simply arriving with more firepower than the other side could imagine. Humans had imagined things in a different direction. Not bigger weapons, not stronger shields. Humans had looked at the problem of interstellar invasion the way humans looked at most large problems, from the side at an angle, through a crack that nobody else had noticed was there. The concept worked on any ship with an electronic nervous system. The Kreth ships ran on the most advanced electronics in this arm of the galaxy. Strand did the arithmetic again, more carefully this time. 15,000 ships. Yes, it would work. It would require every facility running at maximum simultaneously. It would require the satellite network to function perfectly. It would require 6 things to go right in sequence with no margin for any of them to go wrong. 6 things in sequence, under pressure. She had built contingencies for 4 of them. She started building contingencies for the other 2. The reinforcement fleet arrived on the 13th day. Duthverk watched them come in on his tactical display, ship after ship after ship, pouring into the system in waves, taking formation positions around and beyond his original 3,000. The display lit up with green markers until there were too many to count individually, and the system switched to density clouds. 15,000 warships. He had never commanded 15,000 warships. Nobody had commanded 15,000 warships pointed at a single planet since the war with the Orin Collective, and the Orin had had a fleet of their own. Earth had no fleet. Earth had some satellites and some ancient launch vehicles, and whatever trick they had used to disable 93 of his ships. 15,000 warships against a single pre-interstellar planet. He opened the channel to Earth. Secretary General Vazek, the situation has changed. I urge you to reconsider. Fleet Commander Verk. Her voice was exactly as calm as it had been on the first day. He had not been able to rattle it once in 12 days of talking. We see the new fleet. We expected it. We are ready. Before you give any orders, we would like to offer you something. He stopped. Go ahead, he said. We would like to offer you the chance to leave. Take your 3,000 ships and go. Leave the reinforcements. We'll return their crews, undamaged. We understand you were following orders. We have no interest in a war with the Kreth Empire if the Kreth Empire is willing to simply leave. Duthverk looked at 15,000 green markers on his tactical display. Secretary General, he said, and for the first time in 12 days there was something other than flatness in his voice, something that might, in a less experienced officer, have been called disbelief. You are one planet. We are 15,000 warships. Yes, said Alina Vazek, we know. A pause. That's why we're offering you the chance now, before. He stared at the channel indicator for a long moment. I will take that under advisement, he said, which was not a real answer, and he knew it wasn't, and he suspected she knew it wasn't. He closed the channel. He looked at Reth, who was standing at parade rest beside the command console and who had heard everything. She said before, Reth said. I noticed. Before what? Duthverk did not answer. He looked at the blue planet on his direct visual screen. He had been looking at it for 13 days. He had not made a decision about it yet that he was truly comfortable with, and he was a man who had made 43 campaigns worth of comfortable decisions. He told himself the humans were bluffing. He gave the order to advance. The 15,000 ships moved toward Earth. They moved in the most disciplined military formation the Kreth Navy had ever assembled. Commanders from 7 different fleets had merged their units seamlessly. Every ship was in position. Every weapons system was armed. Every shield was at full power. They were 6 light minutes from Earth when the first ship went dark. Then 6 more, then 40, then 100. Then it stopped being individual ships and became something else, a wave. A rolling, sweeping, silent wave moving backward through the fleet from the front, faster than a human could count, ships going dark in such rapid succession that the tactical display could not update fast enough to show it accurately. Whole sections of the formation simply ceased to show active signals. Green markers turning gray, thousands at a time, in patterns that spread like frost spreading across a window. It took 11 minutes. At the end of 11 minutes, Duth Verk's tactical display showed 14,912 ships as dark. His ship was still lit. 87 others were still lit, ships that had been at the very back of the formation, far enough out that the wave had thinned before reaching them. Everything else was dead. 14,912 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, drifting, lightless, silent, engines off, weapons offline, life support running on emergency backup power, in an orbit around a blue-green planet that was not supposed to be able to do this. The bridge of Duth Verk's flagship was completely silent. His tactical officer was not moving. His communications officer was not moving. Reth was not moving. Every person on the bridge had the particular stillness of a person whose model of how the world works has just been destroyed, and who has not yet had time to build a new one. Duth Verk looked at the tactical display for a very long time. The channel from Earth opened. Alina Vazik's voice, still calm, still that particular quality of calm that he now understood was not an absence of emotion but a choice, a deliberate, maintained, professional choice to stay level while the world moved under her feet. Fleet Commander, we have disabled 14,912 of your ships. The crews are unharmed. Life support is functioning. We will restore full ship function within 72 hours as a show of good faith, provided you order your remaining vessels to stand down. We are returning your offer from 13 days ago. You can leave, all of you. We will help you get your disabled ships moving. We will provide you with the technical data you need to prevent this from happening again, because we would rather you be able to defend yourselves than have the Empire send someone else. We have no interest in your empire. We want no territory outside our own system. We ask only one thing. A pause. Don't come back. Duth Verk sat in his command chair. He thought about 43 campaigns. He thought about the Velhari and the Orin and all the species in between that had looked at an incoming Kreth fleet and felt the particular hopelessness of staring at something too large to fight. He thought about the fact that he was now, himself, in a version of that same position. He thought about the word before. He opened the channel. "This is Fleet Commander Duth Verk," he said. "All remaining Kreth vessels stand down." He sat back. He was quiet for a long time. Then, to nobody in particular, in a voice so flat it was almost nothing, he said, "Get me a line to the High Command." He had a report to write. It was going to be a very unusual report. The Kreth High Command did not believe the first report. This was not unusual. High Command had a long institutional tradition of not believing reports that contradicted its assumptions, because its assumptions had been correct for 4,000 years, and 4,000 years of being correct is a very effective argument against changing your mind. They read Duth Verk's report twice. Then they read it 3 more times. Then High Commander Gret Solon, a figure so old that his specific age was considered a state secret, because the Kreth had once had a political tradition of age-based challenges that nobody wanted to revisit, sat back in his chair in the primary command chamber on the Kreth homeworld, and said, carefully, "He is saying that a pre-interstellar species disabled 15,000 warships in 11 minutes. Yes, sir, said his aide. Without a single weapon firing. Without any energy discharge we could detect, yes. And the mechanism is unknown. Completely unknown. Our engineers have examined 12 of the recovered ships. They can identify what was affected, every electronic system disabled simultaneously, but cannot identify how. There is no residue, no interference pattern, no radiation. It is as if the ships were simply told to stop." Gret Solon was quiet for a moment. "Where is Verk now?" "Returning to the homeworld, as ordered." "And the humans?" "They have, as promised, provided technical assistance in restoring the disabled ships. 107 Kreth engineers have been on the surface for 11 days, working with human technicians. All ships have been restored to function. They are returning home now." Another silence. "They helped us fix our own ships," Gret Solon said. "Yes, sir." "After disabling them." "Yes, sir." Gret Solon stood up. He walked to the wall display showing the current state of the Empire 900 star systems, rendered as a glittering map, the largest voluntary dominion in this arm of the galaxy. He had spent his life maintaining it, expanding it, holding it together. He looked at the small, yellow star on the outer edge. "One planet, one species, pre-interstellar. They gave us technical data," he said, "on how to prevent the disabling from happening again." "Yes, sir. Our engineers confirm the data is accurate and complete." "They gave us the counter." "Yes, sir." He turned away from the map. His face showed nothing. He had been doing this long enough that his face showed nothing by default, the same way old rivers cut channels that no longer changed direction. "Convene the council," he said. "We need to discuss our options." The council met for 4 hours. There were 12 members. All 12 had been in the room for the Orin campaign. All 12 had watched the Orin Collective, 60 planets, a fleet of their own, a civilization older than the Kreth Empire by 800 years, sit down and sign the absorption document after one demonstration of force. None of them had ever been in a room discussing what to do when the demonstration of force didn't work. The options on the table were 3. The first option was a third campaign. This time with the counter installed in every ship, the technical fix the humans had provided would neutralize their main weapon. Arrive with numerical superiority, deploy ground forces, use conventional bombardment. Absorb the planet the old-fashioned way. Several council members liked this option. It was straightforward. It restored the pattern. But there was a problem with this option, and the problem had been put on the table by a quiet woman named High Analyst Veth, who had the specific job of being the person who said things nobody wanted to hear. "We don't know what else they have," Veth said. The council looked at her. "We knew nothing about the first weapon," she said. "We assumed zero threat. We were wrong by a factor we cannot calculate. We have fixed the vulnerability they exploited. We do not know if there are other vulnerabilities they have already mapped. We do not know if the technical data they gave us was complete. We do not know if they gave us the counter as a gesture of good faith or as a way to make us confident enough to come back, so they can use something different." The room was quiet. "They are not afraid of us," she continued. "That is the variable that does not fit our model. Every species we have encountered has been afraid of us. Fear is the mechanism. Fear is how this works. These humans were not afraid when we arrived. They are not afraid now. A species that is not afraid of you is a species that has calculated you are manageable." "They cannot have calculated that," said one of the military council members. We are 900 systems. They are one planet. They calculated it correctly, Veth said. That is my point. The second option on the table was a blockade. No invasion. Simply surround the solar system with enough ships to prevent humans from expanding beyond their own planet indefinitely. Contain them. Let time do the work. A species that could not expand would eventually, given their history of internal conflict, manage to damage itself sufficiently. The problem with this option was also put on the table by Veth. Blockades work on species that want to leave, she said. We have reviewed the cultural data from Verk's 13 days of communication. Humans have been trying to kill each other for most of their civilization. They are not primarily motivated by expansion. They are motivated by survival and by the specific pleasure of solving problems that seem impossible. A blockade does not threaten their survival. It gives them a new impossible problem to solve. She paused. Given what they did with the last impossible problem, I do not recommend giving them another one. The third option was silence. Walk away. Leave the yellow star alone. Declare the outer rim of that galaxy a non-expansion zone. Note Earth in the charts as a category no other species had ever warranted. Not absorbed, not destroyed, not a client state. Simply left. The military council members did not like this option. It set a precedent. If you could make the Kreth leave by refusing to surrender, every species with a grudge would start refusing to surrender. Veth had a response to this too. The precedent, she said, requires every other species to have the same capabilities humans demonstrated. Currently, no other species does. We have reviewed the records. The specific combination of factors that made this outcome possible, the weapons research, the decentralized government, the cultural disposition towards solving problems under pressure, the particular type of technological insight they applied, is not present in any other absorbed or candidate species. A pause. Humans are not a precedent. They are an anomaly. The council voted. The vote was 7-5. In favor of option 3. When Duth Verk arrived on the homeworld, he was not court-martialed. He had expected to be. He had written the expectation into his mental model of the next 6 months before his ship had even cleared Earth's solar system. 43 successful campaigns, and the 44th had ended with 15,000 ships drifting silent in orbit around a planet that should have been a 3-day job. He had prepared himself for the formal process, the charges, the demotion. Instead, he was taken directly to High Commander Gret Solin's office. Solin was alone in the room, which was unusual. High commanders held private meetings with subordinates only when they wanted no record of what was said. He offered Duth Verk a seat, which was also unusual. "Tell me about them," Solin said. Verk had expected questions about the campaign, about the tactical decisions, about why he had advanced when the humans had warned him. Instead, the High Commander wanted to know about the people. "What are they like?" Solin asked. "In 13 days of talking, what are they like?" Verk thought for a moment. "They don't stop," he said. "That's the clearest thing. Every other species, when they understand what they're facing, they go quiet. They get smaller. These people got louder. Every conversation there were more of them on the channel, more questions, more enthusiasm, I suppose, like they were having the time of their lives." Solin looked at him. "They thought this was interesting," Verk said. "Not frightening, interesting." He paused. "Their lead diplomat, Vazek. On the 13th day, right before I gave the advance order, she offered us a chance to leave. I told her we had 15,000 warships and she was one planet. She said yes. She said she knew. Like that was the part she'd been waiting for. Like the size of the fleet was the part that made it interesting." Silence. "She wasn't afraid," Verk said. "No," said Solin, "she wasn't." He looked at the window. Outside, the homeworld's capital city spread to the horizon. 4,000 years of empire. The most powerful civilization in this arm of the galaxy. "We are going to leave them alone," Solon said. Verk did not respond. "There will be a formal designation, a category. We will call it restricted contact, meaning no Kreth vessel approaches that system without a standing order from high command, and no such standing order will be issued without my personal review." Verk was quiet for a moment. Then, "The Council will worry about precedent. The Council has been informed that humans are an anomaly." Solon turned from the window. "That is true, but it is not the full reason." He sat down. "The full reason," he said, "is that Veth is right about the fear. We have run this empire on fear for 4,000 years. Every species we have absorbed was afraid of us, and their fear made them manageable. These people are not afraid of us, and that makes them something we have no protocol for. And I have lived long enough to know that when you have no protocol for a thing, you do not poke it until you do." He folded his hands. "We leave them alone. We update our charts. We do not discuss this publicly in terms of defeat. It was a strategic reassessment. We move on." Verk nodded. "And the technical data they gave us," he asked, "the counter for the disabling weapon." "We will install it across the fleet," Solon said, "as they suggested." "And if they gave us incomplete information?" Solon looked at him. His face showed nothing, the way old rivers showed nothing. "Then we will find out," he said, "if they come after us." A pause. "I do not think they will come after us. I think Vazik meant what she said. They don't want our territory. They want to be left alone." He picked up a document from his desk, the formal designation order already prepared. "In 4,000 years," he said quietly, almost to himself, "no species has ever asked us simply to leave." He signed the document. "It is a strange thing," he said, "to respect something you cannot defeat." He set down the pen. "Dismissed, Commander." On Earth, nobody declared victory. This was partly because nobody could quite agree on what had happened. The public knew pieces of it: the fleet, the standoff, the negotiations, the departure. They did not know about Facility 7 or Dr. Strand or the two other facilities like it. They did not know about the concept, or what it was, or how it had worked. That information would stay classified for 60 years, until the world had had time to adjust to the fact that it lived in a galaxy full of other civilizations, and that its first interaction with one of them had gone in a very specific and unusual direction. What the public knew was that 15,000 alien warships had come to Earth, and that 15,000 alien warships had left. In small rooms and large auditoriums, in universities and military briefings and government councils, people started having a conversation that would not end for a very long time. It was a conversation about what had happened and why, about what it meant, about what came next, about the galaxy that had apparently been out there all along, full of empires and wars and species that had been absorbing other species for millennia. About where Earth sat in all of that now. About what they had done and what it would cost them eventually. About whether they had been lucky or whether they had been something else. In Norway, 400 meters underground, Dr. Yeva Strand sat in the Facility 7 control room and did not join any of those conversations. She was already working on something new. 11 years passed. This was not nothing. 11 years was enough time for the world to change its shape. New governments came and went. New technologies moved from classified facilities into everyday life, carefully and quietly, the way things moved when the people releasing them were watching for side effects. New conversations happened about the galaxy, about what was out there, about what Earth's place in it might eventually be. But nothing came to Earth. No Kreth ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. No new species made contact. The stars stayed quiet. Some people found this reassuring. Some people found it deeply suspicious. Dr. Yeva Strand was one of the people who found it suspicious. She had 3 good reasons for her suspicion. The first reason was the signal. 14 months after the Kreth departure, a passive monitoring array, the kind of equipment that had been listening for alien transmissions since before she was born, and that had been moved underground and heavily upgraded in the years before the fleet arrived, had picked up a tight beam signal, very brief, not aimed at Earth, aimed past Earth, at another point in the solar system, as if something had been confirming a position. The signal had no origin point that matched Kreth communication frequencies. It matched something else, something that was not in the Kreth database the Kreth engineers had accidentally left readable on the technical exchange servers during the 11 days they'd been on the surface. Something new. The second reason was the Kreth database itself. During those 11 days, while the Kreth engineers worked alongside human technicians to restore the disabled fleet, there had been not a data breach exactly, more of a data bleed. The Kreth engineers had been using standard Kreth network protocols. The human technicians working with them had been, all 11 of them, people with specific and unusual skill sets that went well beyond ship repair. The database wasn't complete. It was fragments, sections, partial maps, but it was enough to piece together a rough sketch of what the wider galaxy looked like. The sketch was not comforting. The Kreth Empire was large, but the Kreth Empire was not the largest thing in the galaxy. It was not even in the top 4. There were older empires, farther in toward the galactic core, that the Kreth did not discuss in casual communications. The partial database suggested relationships, trading, some kind of treaty structure, a hierarchy that was not stated directly but was implied in hundreds of small references. The Kreth were, in galaxy terms, a regional power. Significant. But regional. The third reason was the simplest. 11 years of silence was too clean. The galaxy was full of civilizations. The Kreth had been in contact with dozens of them. The story of what had happened at Earth, 15,000 ships, 11 minutes, complete neutralization, had not stayed secret inside the Kreth Empire. High Analyst Veth had predicted it wouldn't. Information moved, especially information this unusual. Strand had been tracking the passive monitoring arrays obsessively for 6 years. Other signals had come in, not communications aimed at Earth. Traffic moving through the solar system's vicinity, tight beam, encrypted, using frequencies no human government had publicly acknowledged could be detected. But she could detect them. The galaxy knew Earth existed. The galaxy had been watching quietly for 11 years to see what Earth would do next. She brought her 3 reasons to Secretary General Vazic, who had held the position for 10 years now, which was technically a violation of term limits that several member nations had objected to, and several more had decided to ignore on the grounds that continuity mattered more than precedent in a situation this specific. Vazic listened to everything without interrupting. Then she sat back and looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way she did when she was reorganizing something inside her head. "How long," she asked, "before whatever is watching becomes whatever is moving?" "I don't know," Strand said, "but the signal frequency has increased. 6 months ago it was once a month. Now it's 3 times a week. Something is building toward a decision." Vazic looked at her. "Who are they?" "The partial Kreth database has a reference," Strand said. "A name. Galactic scale translation is rough, but the closest equivalent in any Earth language is something like the congregation. They appear in the database as a trading partner, a treaty co-signatory, and in one section that appears to be an internal security briefing, as a warning." "What kind of warning?" "The kind you put in a security briefing," Strand said. "The kind that says, these are the rules, these are the lines, and here is what happens when someone crosses them." She laid the partial translation on the desk. Vazic read it. Her face was calm. It was always calm. Strand sometimes wondered if the woman felt things the normal way or if the calm had grown so deep it had become the actual substance of her. "They enforce rules," Vazic said. "Apparently." "What rules?" That's what we don't have. We have the fact of the rules. We don't have the content. Vazik was quiet for a moment. And Earth, what is Earth's status in this? Do we exist in their framework? Strand had been working on this question for 4 years. She had 3 partial answers and no complete ones. The Kreth categorized us as restricted contact, she said. That designation went into some kind of shared registry. The database fragments suggest the larger powers in the galaxy have a shared notification system. So the congregation knows we exist. They know what we did. They know the Kreth walked away. And I think that is why they are watching. Vazik looked at the translation again. A species that beat the Kreth, she said, but that has not expanded, has not attacked, has not made any move to leverage what it did. Correct. They're trying to categorize us. I think so. Vazik stood up. She walked to the window of her office. Outside, Geneva was gray and cold, early winter light sitting flat on the lake. Ordinary. Completely ordinary, the way things looked when you couldn't see the machinery underneath. What do we do? She asked. Strand had thought about this for a long time. We decide. She said what we actually are. The decision took 3 months. It was not a public process. It could not be a public process, not because the people in it were hiding something, but because some decisions are best made before they are announced, because the announcement changes the decision and the people making it. You could not put this in front of 8 billion people and still get a clean answer. But the people in the room, 36 this time, grown from the original 31, by the addition of 5 people who had spent 11 years doing specific and important work, tried to represent those 8 billion people as faithfully as they could. The question on the table was not should we respond to the congregation. Something was coming and it would require a response of some kind. The question was, who are we when it gets here? The Kreth had absorbed 900 species. Some of those species had kept their governments, their cultures, their languages. They existed inside the empire, functional and intact, paying taxes and providing soldiers and resources, their histories continuing. A few had even, over centuries, risen to positions of genuine authority within the imperial structure. They were not free, but they were not erased. Other species, the ones that had fought and lost, had been handled differently. Earth had done something no species in the Kreth's 4,000 years had managed. It had not fought and lost. It had not surrendered. It existed in a category that had no name in the Kreth's administrative system. It had been given the word restricted, which was the closest available term, but which meant something different in practice. It meant leave it alone and don't ask why. The congregation was looking at a planet that had done something unprecedented. They were going to arrive with some kind of framework, a set of rules, a structure, an expectation, because that was what large galactic powers did. They organized. They categorized. They assigned roles and relationships and hierarchy. Earth was going to be asked to fit into a framework. The question was which framework and on whose terms. The 36 people in the room spent 2 months arguing about this. Then they spent 1 month writing something. Not a response to the congregation. Not a set of demands, not a list of capabilities, not a threat. A document. It was 12 pages long. It explained, as clearly as they could manage in a language that would need to be translated through several intermediary tongues, what Earth was, what humans valued, what they would and would not accept in a relationship with other civilizations, what they offered, what they required. It was, one of the military council members said, reading the final draft at 2 in the morning with cold coffee and tired eyes, basically a treaty proposal for a relationship that didn't exist yet with a party they hadn't met yet, covering terms for a situation nobody had a precedent for. Yes, said Vazik, reading her own copy across the table. Is that insane? He asked. She thought about it. Probably, she said, but so is everything we've done so far. She turned a page. The Kreth sent 15,000 warships, she said. We wrote them a 12-page document explaining who we are. I feel like we should be consistent. The congregation did not arrive the way the Kreth had arrived. There was no fleet. There was no fleet formation darkening the outer solar system. There was no countdown and no ultimatum and no 48 hours. There was a single ship. It appeared at the edge of the system on a Thursday in late October, 11 years and 4 months after the Kreth had left. It was small by warship standards, about the size of a large cargo vessel. It made no aggressive moves. It broadcast on the same frequencies the Kreth had used, which suggested it had done its research. It sent a message. The message was in 11 languages simultaneously, which meant whoever was sending it had been cataloging human languages at some point without announcing they were doing it. The human translation team had all 11 versions translated within 2 hours and found them identical in meaning, which was either impressive or unsettling or both. People of Earth, we represent the congregation of recognized systems. We would like to speak with whoever speaks for you. We come without weapons. We ask to meet in person on your planet's surface at a location of your choosing. Vazik read the message. She noted the phrase, whoever speaks for you, not a demand that they have a government, not an assumption about their structure, an acknowledgement that they might be complicated. She noted at a location of your choosing, not a demand that they come to the ship, not an assumption about the power differential. She noted without weapons, which was either true and important or a lie designed to seem important, and she had no way to know which. She sent back a location. She chose Geneva. She sent the 12-page document with the location. The response came back within 6 minutes. We have read your document. We appreciate its directness. We will see you Thursday. Thursday came. The congregation's representative was a being called Emissary Secundus Orath Vel. The translation team struggled with the precise meaning of Emissary Secundus for several days before settling on something like second-tier official with full decision-making authority. It was not the congregation's most senior diplomat. It was, however, the one with the power to sign things. Orath Vel was not a large being. It was, to the surprise of several people in the meeting room who had been expecting something more dramatic, roughly human-shaped, 2 legs, 2 arms, a head, though everything was proportioned slightly differently, and its skin had a quality that reminded people of different things depending on who was describing it. The meeting room had been specifically adjusted for its comfort. The congregation had sent the adjustments in advance, which again meant they had done their research. Orath Vel sat across the table from Alina Vazik. It looked at her for a moment. Then it placed a hand flat, palm down on the table. It was a gesture that the translation team recognized from the database fragments. It meant, I am here in good faith. I have no hidden agenda. This is what it always meant in the parts of the database where it appeared. Vazik placed her own hand flat on the table. Orath Vel said something. Its translator device rendered it. You are the species that made the Kreth leave, it said. It was not a question. Yes, Vazik said. Orath Vel was quiet for a moment. Then it said, with a precision that suggested the words had been carefully chosen. We have been watching you for 11 years. We have been trying to understand what you are. Have you succeeded? Vazik asked. No, it said. That is why we came to ask you. The meeting lasted 9 days. Not because there was that much to agree on. The core of what was said between Alina Vazik and Orath Vel could have been compressed into an afternoon, but because both parties understood that what happened in this room would not just affect their 2 civilizations. It would set a shape for things, and shapes, once set, are hard to unset. They both moved carefully. Orath Vel explained the congregation. It was not an empire. That was the first and most important distinction. The Kreth were an empire, a structure built on absorption, on one power at the center pulling everything else into orbit around it. The congregation was older than the Kreth by 6,000 years and had been built on a different logic entirely. It was a network. Member civilizations kept their governments, their militaries, their internal laws. They agreed to a shared set of rules for interaction, how disputes were resolved, how trade worked, how new civilizations were contacted, what was and was not permitted in galactic-scale conflict. The rules were enforced. This was the part that mattered. When the Kreth fleet had appeared at Earth's solar system, it had been inside the rules. Pre-interstellar species were subject to absorption under the Kreth standing membership terms. The congregation had a mechanism for this, a framework for how client civilizations were brought into the network through intermediary empires. It was not a system most pre-interstellar species would have chosen, but it was functional, and it had been in place long enough that most of the galaxy had stopped questioning it. What Earth had done was not inside the rules. Not because it was violent, there had been no violence. Not because it was destructive, not a single Kreth crew member had been harmed. What Earth had done was outside the rules because the rules did not have a category for it. The rules had a category for resistance and defeat, which led to harder absorption terms. The rules had a category for surrender, which led to standard absorption terms. The rules had a category for voluntary application for membership, which bypassed the absorption process entirely. The rules did not have a category for disable 15,000 warships, give them back, hand their operators a technical fix, and politely ask everyone to leave. Oreth Vel explained all of this carefully, with the precision of someone reading from a very long document that they had already read many times. Then it said, "The congregation has been in discussion about your situation for 11 years. There are 3 positions." Vazek waited. "The first position," it said, "is that what you did constituted an act of war against a member civilization. The Kreth Empire is a congregation member. You disabled their fleet. Under the rules, this should trigger a review process that could result in sanctions, or in the congregation authorizing the Kreth to try again, with the full support of the network." The room was very quiet. "The second position," Oreth Vel continued, "is that what you did was not an act of war because you initiated no attack. You responded to a fleet that had entered your solar system uninvited with a declared intent to absorb your civilization. Under the rules, self-defense is always a mitigating factor. The question is whether what you did qualifies as self-defense or as a demonstration of offensive capability." It paused. "The third position is that what you did doesn't fit any existing category, and therefore the congregation should hold all determinations until Earth is properly assessed and classified." Vazek nodded slowly. "Which position has the most support?" she asked. "The third," said Oreth Vel, "with the second as a secondary position." "And the first?" "The Kreth Empire supports the first position." "Of course they do," said Vazek. Oreth Vel made a sound that the translation device did not render as words. It might have been a laugh. It was not easy to tell. "The Kreth Empire," it said, "does not have the support needed to enforce the first position. They have tried twice to build that support in the Council. They have not succeeded. The rest of the congregation is more interested in understanding you than in punishing you." Vazek looked at it for a moment. "Why?" she asked. "Why are they interested?" Oreth Vel was quiet for a moment. It had a specific quality of quietness. She had noticed. It did not pause to think. It paused to decide how much of its thinking to share. A diplomatic habit she recognized because she had it too. "Because," it said finally, "in 6,000 years, the congregation has never encountered a pre-interstellar civilization that responded to first contact the way you did. Most are afraid. Some are defiant and pay for it. A very few are clever enough to negotiate. None have done what you did, neutralized the threat, returned what was taken, provided assistance, and then simply asked to be left alone. It placed both hands flat on the table. You did not try to leverage what you did. You did not demand anything. You asked for nothing except to be left alone. In 6,000 years, this is the first time we have seen that. Vazik looked at the hands on the table. And that's suspicious, she said. That's what makes you watch us for 11 years instead of just contacting us. Yes, said Orethvel. Either it was genuinely what it appeared to be, a civilization that wanted peace and had the means to enforce its desire for peace, or it was a strategy, something larger, some slower game we couldn't yet see. And now, after 11 years, we believe it was genuine, it said. We do not understand why. Most civilizations want more territory, more resources, more security, more influence. You wanted less. You wanted everyone to go away. Vazik was quiet for a moment. We've been trying to kill each other for most of our history, she said. We have enough problems of our own. We don't need yours. Orethvel was quiet. Then it said, that is either the most honest thing a diplomat has ever said to me, or the most effective opening position I have encountered in 6,000 years of first contacts. Maybe both, Vazik said. This time, the sound the translation device didn't render was definitely a laugh. On the 6th day, they got to the real question. What was Earth? Not philosophically, practically. What was Earth's status in the congregation's framework? What rules applied? What rights did Earth have? What obligations? Vazik had the 12-page document. Orethvel had the congregation's charter, which was considerably longer than 12 pages, but which Orethvel had apparently memorized, and could navigate from memory with the ease of someone who had lived inside it for a long time. They worked through it section by section. Earth would not accept absorption. That was absolute, non-negotiable. Whatever framework emerged, Earth retained full sovereignty over its own system, its own government, its own decisions. This was stated in the 12-page document on page 1, in the first paragraph, in the clearest language the document contained. Orethvel said the congregation could accommodate this. There were voluntary membership tiers. A civilization could join the network without being absorbed by any empire, without surrendering decision-making authority, without accepting a client relationship with a larger power. What a voluntary member got in exchange for following the shared rules: protection. Not military protection, necessarily, though the congregation's enforcement arm was real and had teeth. What a voluntary member got was primarily legal protection. No member civilization could be absorbed by an empire without its consent. No fleet could enter a member's system with hostile intent without triggering a review process. The rules that had allowed the Kreth to show up at Earth's solar system uninvited were the rules that applied to non-members. Members had different rules. Better rules. Vazik read the relevant sections carefully. Then she read them again. What's the catch? She asked. You follow the rules, Orethvel said. When the congregation makes a determination about a dispute involving Earth, you accept the determination, even if it goes against you. And who makes the determinations? A council of member representatives. You would have a seat. One seat, Vazik said. Among how many? Currently 411. She looked at it. One seat among 411, she said. And if those 411 members vote against us on something important? Orethvel met her gaze, or the equivalent of meeting her gaze, since its eyes were not configured quite the same way, and said, then you have to decide whether what you agreed to matters more than what you want. It was the most honest thing anyone had said in 6 days of careful talking. Vazik was quiet for a long time. I need to take this back to my government, she said. Of course, said Orethvel, take as long as you need. How long did the other voluntary members take? Orethvel thought. The fastest was 3 years, the slowest was 41. Vazik did not smile, but something shifted in her face. We'll aim for something in between, she said. Orethvel left on the 9th day. Before it boarded its shuttle to return to its ship, it stopped in the hallway outside the meeting room. Vazik had walked with it. Protocol, partly. And partly because 9 days of talking creates a specific kind of relationship, not friendship exactly, but the understanding that exists between two people who have been trying very hard to be honest with each other. Orethvel turned to her. I have a question, it said, outside of the official record. Go ahead, she said. The technology you used against the Kreth fleet, it said. We have not been able to determine what it was. Our technical analysts have reviewed everything we could gather, signal data, ship recovery reports, Kreth engineering assessments. Nothing. We cannot identify the mechanism. Vazik said nothing. I am not asking for the mechanism, Orethvel said. I am asking, did you always have it, or did you build it in response to the threat? She looked at the hallway wall for a moment. Plain gray, institutional. We built it before the threat, she said. We were preparing for a threat we didn't know would be the Kreth specifically. We were just preparing. Orethvel was quiet. For how long, it asked. Officially, the last 30 years, she paused. Unofficially, we have been thinking about this kind of problem since the first time we pointed a telescope at the sky and realized we weren't alone. Orethvel absorbed this. You have been preparing to defend yourselves against something you hadn't met. It said, for decades. We're good at that, she said. You're afraid, it said. Not an accusation, just a recognition. We're human, she said. Fear is how we work. The trick is what you do with it. Orethvel placed its hand flat on the wall beside the door. The same good faith gesture from the meeting room, smaller and more private here. We will talk again, it said. I expect so, Vazik said. It left. In the years that followed, the galaxy's understanding of Earth changed slowly and unevenly. The way understanding always changed when the thing being understood didn't cooperate with easy categories. The congregation's 411 member civilizations had spent 11 years with a question mark in their charts where Earth should have been. Now they had something different, not an answer exactly, but a shape. A civilization that had declined to be absorbed, declined to be aggressive, declined to be afraid, and had sat in its small corner of the outer rim doing the infuriating and remarkable thing of simply continuing to exist on its own terms. Duthverk retired from the Kreth Navy 8 months after his return. He took no public role. He lived quietly. He gave one interview to a journalist whose access to him was so unlikely that several historians later spent years trying to understand how it had been arranged. In the interview, he was asked what had surprised him most about the humans. He was quiet for a long time before answering. Their patience, he said. They had the capability to do much more than they did. They could have damaged us. They could have destroyed ships. They had something that worked and they used it in the most restrained way possible. They made their point and then they stopped. He looked out the window of wherever he was. In 43 campaigns, he said, I never encountered an enemy that stopped on purpose. That was the thing I kept thinking about afterward. They stopped on purpose. The journalist asked if he thought they would stay stopped. Verk was quiet again for a moment. I think, he said slowly, that the galaxy would be very wise to hope so. In Norway, 400 meters underground, Facility 7 was still running. Dr. Yeva Strand had not taken a title change, or a public role, or an interview. She had accepted one significant thing, a larger budget. The budget had arrived with no attached conditions and no formal request for deliverables, which she understood to mean that whoever had approved it knew better than to ask. She had also acquired 3 new colleagues, people whose specific skill sets she had been trying to recruit for 9 years, and who had finally been freed from other obligations. She was working on something new. The concept, the thing that had gone unnamed for 22 years and that she still hadn't officially named, had worked against the Kreth's electronic systems because the Kreth systems were built on a specific architecture. The congregation's partial database suggested that most spacefaring civilizations in this arm of the galaxy used variations of the same basic architecture, which meant the concept, refined and extended, was not a one-time trick. It was a foundation. She was not building a weapon. She had never thought of it as a weapon. It was more like a language, a way of speaking to systems, any systems, and asking them very politely to stop. Outside, winter had arrived in Norway, snow on the mountain, cold, clean air. Strand was 360 meters below all of that, and did not know what the weather was. She was working. On the surface of the planet and across its 7 billion inhabitants, and in the quiet hum of conversations that nobody was broadcasting to the rest of the galaxy, Earth was also working. Not on weapons, or not only on weapons. On the harder and stranger and more important project of figuring out what it was, and what it wanted to be in a galaxy it had just introduced itself to in the most unusual possible way. The congregation was watching. The Kreth were watching, from a careful distance, with an expression that did not have a clean translation into any human language, but that was somewhere in the territory between respect and wariness. 14 other civilizations, whose existence Earth had only recently confirmed through increasingly detailed analysis of the partial Kreth database, were also watching. Earth did not perform for any of them. It went about its business, argued with itself, solved problems, made things, built things, occasionally in the grand old human tradition, broke things and then fixed them, fed its people, buried its dead, raised its children in the shadow of a sky that was no longer just sky but something bigger and stranger and more complicated than any previous generation of children had grown up knowing. It was, as it had always been, a difficult and magnificent and perpetually unfinished project. The galaxy watched. Earth kept building. In the end, the Kreth never sent another fleet. Not because they were forbidden. Not because the congregation stopped them, though the congregation's rules gave them reason to hesitate. They didn't send another fleet because Gretz Solon had been right about one thing, the thing he had said quietly in his office to a retired commander who was trying to understand a defeat that didn't look like a defeat and didn't feel like one either. It is a strange thing to respect something you cannot defeat. Strange but real. The galaxy was old and full of powers, and the powers had their wars and their treaties and their long, slow games of dominance. Earth was new to all of it, new and small and sitting in its unremarkable corner of the outer rim, one planet around one yellow star, with 7 billion people who had spent most of their history arguing with each other and who had still, somehow, managed to look at 15,000 warships and think, we can handle this. Not because they were the strongest thing in the galaxy. Not because they had the biggest fleet, or the oldest civilization, or the most advanced technology. Because they were the thing they had always been, the thing that had survived ice ages and plagues, and every catastrophe the planet could throw at them, and every catastrophe they could throw at each other. Stubborn, prepared, and not, under any circumstances, going to stop.